Hello, everyone. This is a Double OG's podcast. So this is French OG as French OG3 on X. And I have the pleasure and the honor to have as a guest Daniel Catus, a poker legend. If you ever been in the poker days during the 2010s, even still playing to this day. And I believe you're in China. And please, Daniel, can you just present yourself and also maybe say your poker handles? Maybe people will know you better as such.
Sure. Well, for people who know about poker, I was Jungleman. One of my names was Wookiees, but I'm largely known as Jungleman in the poker world, and I've succeeded in all kinds of things in the poker. For those that know, and had extreme success in the form of winning tens of millions, even though it's not always on it's not on the tournament tracking, but it's on the cash game tracking to some extent. I was like the third biggest winner of all time on one of the sites, or a couple of the sites actually. One of the sites and then another one. But yeah, that's roughly what I've done. And yeah, now I'm in China. I've one of the brands I've signed with is a Chinese poker company, the only one really, and it is promoting me and making me building my name in China. And it seems like I'm the perfect Westerner from poker, at least to become famous in China. So it just seems like such a great opportunity. And they're touring me around China and showing me a bunch of fancy things in like six different cities, something like that. Might go to seven or so. Started in Chengdu. Now I went to, where else did I go to? I went to Chongqing, the city with 32 million people. Chengdu had 21 million people. Almost no one's ever heard of these cities, and they're fucking massive and really beautiful, actually.
What?
Uh, and apparently, it's popular on Chinese Instagram to be a total tourist and just be really in awe of Chinese things, which I'm totally. I think I could do a great job of that. I can totally do that. And yeah, there's a lot of really cool things in China, even though it's winter and cold as fuck. Mostly me trying weird as shit foods like rabbit skull. That was a really weird one. Like the
Oh.
lady opened up the fucking skull right in front of me, and I'm just like, how do I eat this thing? I can't even figure it out because it's mostly bone, right? What other weird shit? Pig brain, turtle today, all the weird shit things. There was fried grasshopper or fried cricket as well. That wasn't so bad actually because there's not much cricket left. And yeah, that's roughly been going on. By the way, Chongqing might have the world's best view, a world's best skyline that I've seen. It's close between that city, Hong Kong, and Dubai. So it's a very
Oh,
brief
okay. Oh.
overview of
Well,
what.
actually, Chongqing rings a bell to me because
Like,
my best friend's girlfriend is from Chongqing. So yeah. So I've never been there, but if you tell me that they got the best skylines, well, maybe that's a good excuse for me to go. Definitely, I've never been to China before, so on the bucket list potentially.
yeah, it's got a
So
fucking amazing skyline, loads of crazy foods, a culture that's kind of similar to Japan's. There's lots of crazy stuff and lots of little things you can do and weird foods. They've got sushi. Actually got sushi with. I've never seen this before. Sushi with sprinkles, sushi with Fruit Loops on there as well, and totally clean city and totally safe. So there's lots of
yeah,
pluses.
that's a big thing. Actually, before we delve into the subject of the pod, I've been curious because the Chinese regime is allowing gambling. Were they not more likely like to be banning it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Sort of is the answer to that. So the way it works is, well, first of all, one crazy thing about the Chinese government is that it actually cares about its people. I have to research this a bit more, but recently they kind of kicked out a bunch of corrupt billionaires, like half of them or so. Could be wrong about the statistic, but the whole idea was that they're just getting rid of corruption, and apparently the latest government is actually good government, and like they have much better leadership than apparently the US, for example. And so the way it works with poker is that it varies per legislation. Like Macau, it's totally free. In Macau, it's totally free, but that's sort of not China. There's a place in just another county where it's legal for whatever reason in Sanya, and basically the whoever runs the tournaments has convinced the people of the government that it's not so bad for society. That's literally the reason why. and has packaged it in such a way that it's a bit of like a vacation and whatever. And because it's like seen as something that's not so bad and comes with some positive perks in the specific area. It's a tropical area of China that most people haven't heard of. It's in a little island. The government tolerates it, and they've also been giving charity as well, which has helped to convince the government. I thought that because every single person in the government has to agree that it's good for society, that there'd be corruption in the
Mhm.
government, but apparently not. Apparently, actually, it doesn't work like that. It's literally if somehow it's just looking like a positive thing. So apparently, surprisingly that situation is stable. Like there's not anything. Someone can't isn't no one's being an asshole and just saying, excuse me, let me rephrase my words. I thought that someone
No, it's
could
fine.
just
It's fine. You can swear on this. It's cool.
okay. Well, I'm just saying that I want to explain that there was a possibility that someone could be an asshole and say, "Oh no, poker's bad, but you have to bribe me $1 bazillion or whatever." But no
Yeah,
one's
yeah,
doing
yeah.
anything like that, which is surprises me. It's actually a reliable situation for poker to exist in that area, and not a whole lot of people know about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, the imagery of the local governments, are being very corruptible and everything. Well, goes against it. Maybe there have been some house cleaning from the top down. Who knows?
Oh, that's the idea.
But
That's
you know,
billionaires with the house cleaning. Also, should mention that the site operates because it doesn't take any rake, but it charges money for time banks and for this potential to reveal everyone's cards, which also serves to help show that no one's cheating.
okay, I see. I see. Yeah, no, no, fair enough. I mean, it's kind of like reminds me a bit of Islamic finance. They don't charge interest, but they charge some type of stuff that is equivalent to interest, but just for optics perspective. It's called something else. But yeah. So actually, that's a good segue here. So how did it come? Like, how did we go from, let's say, poker to dating here? Because originally, like, you reached out to me and we exchanged, and you said to me like, yeah, definitely, I'd like to talk about dating. How did this come to be of interest to you as a subject matter?
Well, those subjects are actually there are certain similarities between those subjects, at least from a man's perspective. For a woman's, probably, but most women don't think like this. But I will say that having met a bunch of women and being on the spectrum myself, that there are some that actually think like a fucking autistic guy in some ways. It's unbelievable. Like one of them, actually, by the way, who has a Twitter, is very popular, is Ayla, whatever her name is,
Oh,
AELLA.
yeah.
You know who I'm talking about? Maybe you follow her.
People have. I mean, I don't follow her, but I know people have been telling me about her here and there. Yeah. So.
Well, she's an interesting subject just because she breaks so many things that we assumed were like just written in stone about women. For an example, she actually has like a fucking survey where you could take, and she's actually picked people who have taken her survey and dated them from this thing. Like this is
She
something
has
that
dated guys from the surveys.
guys take
Is
the
that
survey.
someone that's?
You didn't know about this.
No, I didn't know. But you know what? It goes that she's very diligent in her due diligence. That's for
Well,
sure. Damn.
like it makes sense to do something like that if you're a girl, if you're smart enough, but a lot of them are just kind of in the dark and just don't know what the fuck's going on. Same with guys, of course. But anyway, let's go back to poker for a second. Well, because I'm on the spectrum, I've tended to look at things in a bit more of a what would be for normal people a bit of a strange way. But it makes a lot of sense if we're trying to get to the root of things, which is basically just like creating a strategy to come to the best possible sort of situations, both with trial and error and also with logic and like realizing, okay, this isn't working, we're going to try something else. So this really works perfectly in poker. If you are losing, you should like high level overlook at your overall strategy and figure out what the fuck's wrong and solve it. And a lot of that has to do, by the way, with figuring out with problematizing, which is how you actually look at the problem. And when we get to dating, it's a really weird problem to solve. It's a very hard problem to solve for sure for a lot of normal guys. And it does require a lot of problematizing in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of things in normal society that the red pill says, that feminism says, that whoever the fuck says, that are totally I think they really try to help. There's quite a bit of truth to them, in my opinion. They're not really getting the full picture, but we have to get kind of solve this in almost like a computer science or business perspective. Actually, that's more accurate sort of way. And at some point, the ideas behind solving how you make more money in poker, or at least the themes, I should say, do actually apply in dating. And so does this idea of like working the politics, etc., look a bit similar to how you might. I mean, there's some similarity, I should say, between like how you like give value in dating, and at some point, even like how charming you are at a poker table can be like related to how charming you are with a woman. There's some similarity to that, right? Like if
Hmm.
you're gonna be charismatic and fun anyway, uh,
Hmm.
this is going to help well with women, but it also helps well with people wanting to be around you when you play poker, because definitely there's some kind of edge in that you get to, if you're more charming, you get invited to games, you get people to want to play with you even if they're taking the money, and that kind of thing. And you make more friends and you get invited to parties and you meet other people, that sort of thing. So when you have to think in the direction of, okay, well, how do I become more charming, this is something that's useful for helping your dating life but also helping your poker
Hmm.
life. Is this making any kind of sense to you?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Why does it make sense? Because I mean, you're talking a lot about live poker tournament, right? In terms of like the auras, the charismas, affability, all of that, right? And that has some positive ripple effect, whether upon you being going to the best tables, going to the best place, the best venue, etc., etc. Personally, myself, so my story is I was a NL 100 and a NL 200 grinder. Basically, made most of my 70% of my money in cash game, 30% of my money in tournaments. Never went into the high stake because to me, I was I was a proponent of the easy way. I would rather basically keep my interest, my ROI high, or my DB slash 100 high, where you had like some people that could basically extract money at decent limits. And then afterwards, I paid my university, and and in a way, when I went to take it more seriously, I kind of like lost the fun of it. If you see what I'm saying, it's like
I know.
there's a gap when you go from, let's say, recreational, semi-pro to pro, because I lost the joy, and I was not as good afterwards. And once you lose the joy, like I thought, you know what, there are better things that I would do. So it helped me pay for my university. So I know how to, but I've rarely been on how do you say it? on the on the circuit on the court. Although I went to Vegas once with my company. I remember the first night I lost my credit card because I ended up with some blonde bird from fucking Scottsdale, and I don't know what happened to my credit card. Anyway, she paid me the drinks. Anyway, the next day I didn't have my credit card. I only had 200 $200, and I had to go to the MGM in order to go to on cash game. Managed to basically get that up to 3,000, and I could stay for the week. that was quite the the roller coaster. But so on that front, I can imagine that, right? Because I know some of those big poker player names, right? Like the Negranu, recently, what's his name? Like the Spanish guy that is really really good on the tournament side.
Sergio
Mateos, Andrew Mateos, right? Like the guy. Yeah, yeah.
Mateos, yeah.
He's with the French yeah, Adrian Mateos. Adrian Mateos.
Yeah.
For the Phil Ivey, the Phil Galfin, all the people. So obviously you have also the Poker After Dark guys. I'm sure your friend Tom Don, you remember of him, if you see what I'm saying. And yeah, so but for me, the way I saw poker in terms of really appreciating dating is from the strategy, right? Like when you start playing poker, right? Like you're like, I want something that simplifies it, right? So I'm going to play tag, so tight aggressive, meaning by that, I'm going to focus on top of the range card, but I'm going to be very stereotypical in the way I play, right? And I'm going to play on a 9-handed table, meaning by that, I'm going to use mainstream stuff. But then what I realized is when I stopped being so stereotypical, when I started to be a bit more creative, when I started playing a little bit more large aggressive, and what made me realize is sometimes there's time to protect your hand, there's time to not protect your hand, and the flop defines the situation alongside your position, the players, etc., etc. So But the main lesson I want to say is this, because I can go on talk about it for 2 hours or whatnot, is you can make the right move that's got the most positive expected value, but because on that point in time, because the flop, the turn, the river, the person playing, whatever, it doesn't fit. And even though you were right in the way you played, you're losing. And people will draw too many conclusions from that in terms of, and then overthink and requalify their way of thinking when they don't have enough sample data in order for them to actually draw the right conclusion. And that's where I thought poker as a game can help you understand the human nature and the social dynamics whenever it comes to people. You can't
Yeah.
have that single silver bullet. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually. Basically, both are games of, well, you could call dealing with people game of incomplete information. And you could totally do the right thing at the poker table. Happens all the time, where you do the right thing and it just doesn't work out and you get screwed. And ironically, if you did the bad thing, it would have happened to save you money or whatever it is, but not in the long run. And I mean, it's true for people and women too. I mean, there's lots of times where you should be aggressive or you should be confident or whatever. It doesn't fucking work with the girl because she's not about it, or take a shot or whatever it is, or approach, etc. It just doesn't work. But it's kind of similar in the fact that you have to have the mindset of looking at like the long run, and what's most pussy in the long run. And there's certainly times, actually, building on that analogy, where you shouldn't approach. You should actually play passive. You play the tournament for the long game rather than be loose aggressive and approach everybody. The thing where that would matter is if you're working social game, and this is how things, I guess, used to work back in the old days when we were in villages. So you don't want to approach, rightfully so, because you'll ruin your reputation if you approach every girl. But if you're working the social game would be, you don't approach, you wait for them to approach you, you build enough value or whatever it is, or you appear cool enough so they want to approach you and they pick you, essentially. But since there's there's not so much, people aren't really in communities anymore, a lot of time just being aggressive, and well, not literally aggressive, but talking to many women is actually the best move, is the irony these days.
Yeah, in a way, it's but you have to find, the thing is, the biggest thing is the time wasters, right? You have traps, you have flops where you have to kind of like manage the pot size, because either it's very drawy, you have too many people, you don't have enough depth if you're playing in a tournament, depending upon the blinds. What's another key thing is there are so many variables at play. The way you play a heads up, the way you play a six-handed, the way you play a nine-handed completely varies. I'm going to stick to No Limit Hold'em. I know that you play also Omaha, but this is not my cup of tea, so I won't be able to. But that's also something to really bear in mind whenever you deal with women, is that you can do everything right, but you have to understand that you're not the only variable. Like so this is the levels of game, right? Within poker. When you started, you're thinking, okay, well, those are my hands. I'm going to play my hand, right? Then you're like, okay, well, and you're going to play according to what the hand you have with the flop, but also the other person, what you suspect his range is, right? And if you have some metadata with that other person, you're thinking third level, right? If he thinks that I think, if I know that he thinks that I know, then you're thinking, okay, so I need to play a different way than you expect me to play. And that's not discounting the pot odds, the implied odds, etc., right? So what I'm saying here, it's there are different levels to game, whether it's with girls or whether it's in poker, and it's normal for you to start first level, then second level, then third level, and I think you can discuss that even better than I do, considering the levels that you played.
Well, I think like the analogy here, at least that I'm thinking of, is this would be where you'd have to deal with more difficult issues, or where you're running, just making certain kind of jokes, I guess, where you're pretending to be like a virgin, or you're just using some kind of sarcasm to be funny. That would be, I guess, the analogy with women, or like they think you're a player, or that kind of thing. You have that kind of problem. I could see that making sense with women, because at some point when you get too good at poker, you do face some unusual problems where you have to figure out how to solve them. And I guess that's true with women too.
Tell us.
Huh?
Tell us. I mean, I'd be curious to hear, because I've not, I'm definitely, I didn't come close to wherever you are right now. So,
well, so there's a few different routes to success in poker, which is partly what makes it interesting. But basically, if you become notoriously good, no one wants to play against you. And this is part of the reason why I kept learning other games, because I basically got super good at No Limit, at least in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And then no one wanted to play against me, heads up. I was the best in the world, heads up, at the time. I'm no longer the best in the world at heads up, No Limit anyway. Um, the irony is I don't think I'm very special at that anymore. And then I
Mm-hmm.
learned PLO. And then like that was an experience. And then I learned live poker, and then at some point I learned ring, which took me way too fucking long, because my action kept drying up and I wanted to expand my opportunities. But basically, that's one weird problem that you face, is that people don't want to play against you and you're scared to play, or they don't want you in your private game, in their private games, because they think you're going to take their money, which is a little bit of an exaggeration. And you have to figure out ways to, if you want to make more money, you have to figure out ways to expand somehow. Or, and then, at some point you're like, you have this other weird problem where people know who you are, and then they start playing a certain way against you that counters what you're doing, or they polarize their strategies against you as a population, meaning they, like, some people will let you just not mess with you at all, and some people will like go out of their way to fuck with you and like try to look cool or do something crazy against you to brag to their friends or whatever, or look cool on TV. So those are some of the weird things that happen. That being said, because of my notoriety, I got a bit of a, yeah, I feel like my whole life experience in many ways really breaks down, it really challenges a lot of the status quos of the red pill and feminism. It kind of puts at least when I became famous, I got put in the shoes of like how a girl might feel, um,
Mm-hmm.
where I'd have a bunch of guys coming up to me and I don't really know who the fuck they are, and I'm not interested in them really. They're most of nerdy guys. Like, okay, like it's cool, they're my fans. And like a lot of them would have the most boring topics to talk about. I'd be like, I'm willing to talk to you, but for fuck's sake, don't ask me how I did in the tournament. How are you? Where are you from? That's literally like 90% of the questions. I'm just like, ugh, just ask me anything else. For fuck's sake, I literally talk about all these other things, and no one wants to talk about them. But sometimes, yeah, I've actually hit it off with like some fans or whatever. Like, why not? And you start getting the idea, at least at some point when I became more famous and I tried to become more famous, it occurred to me that, and girls face this problem, they have this massive filtering problem. And there's a point where I don't know if they all realize this, but more attention is not really good. You actually want to filter for the kind of attention you want to get as you become more famous. And if you're a girl, and there is actually a very important parallel to this that I personally want to challenge, but it's a bit scary. It's a personal suspicion I have of mine, but I really can't prove it. But at least while I was, let me just say, at some point I was trying to get more famous, and we weren't really sure how the fuck to do it. Me and my group of friends, and it was very expensive. And they had this idea to do these things that I personally thought were cringy, such as like post pictures with cars and like champagne bottles and that kind of stuff, like worth the angle of money. And I just wasn't having it at all. This is not at all what I signed up for. And it occurred to me that this felt like shit, and I didn't really want to be famous in the sense of optimizing for just numbers, right? So, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of people could relate to that. Rather, it made a lot more sense to do it in a way that attracted, that was true to myself and that attracted people like myself. And similarly, I think girls have a bit of a similar problem because they have to figure out how to attract the right guys to them, right? Rather than a bunch of fucking idiots that are going to be annoying. And I personally suspect, I just want to throw it out there, that a lot of the makeup and a lot of the fake boobs and a lot of the fake all these other things are attracting larger numbers of guys, but not the right ones. So they're actually filtering away a lot of, they're like filtering away the right positives, and not filtering,
Mm-hmm.
not like narrowing down for the for the uh for the ones that are best for them. And that this kind of opens up another wormhole of conversation. And there is some evidence of this, by the way. Matter of fact, in the data, and it goes into the whole subject of marketing, which is a different conversation. This is where dating might look a little bit more like business. Matter of fact, and there seem to be a lot of parallels there. But before I
Mhm.
continue another more non sequiturs, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, the marketing in terms of getting what you want in terms of people, because the thing is, once quantity becomes too big, it really is at the expense of quality, I find. It's not that quantity makes the quality. I think that quantity eventually overwhelms the quality. Why? Think about it this way, right? Like, say, for example, you have people even on Twitter, right? They have, like, let's say 10K followers, but they have, like, let's say a business setup, everything sorted out, etc., and they can make 100K, right? Why? Because they focus on that niche, and that niche is generally hiring individuals, people. So they're not necessarily, how do I say? They're not engagement whoring in the sense of, yeah, I want to get a massive amount of followers. I want good followers. They're not necessarily going to like it, but they're going to bookmark, they're going to be lurking, and they're going to be the right type of customer, right? Whereas, let's say, for example, you can go, it's great for clout, right? It's great for a little, even validation for yourself, etc., etc. When you have like a massive amount of followers, but if it's so heterogeneous, the problem lies is, well, like, if you have a business, you may even make less than the guy who's 10K who's already created his audience, right? And the
Mm.
same thing with girls, right? In the sense of, okay, well, you're going to cater to the wider area, the widest spectrum of guys, right? When it comes to basically big boobs, big ass, fillers, Botox, nice hair. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for this, right? I'm not going to cast a stone here, but
Wait, what are you?
but uh, but at the same time, the same way a guy will be like, the way you were saying about the cringy advertisement marketing of yourself with big cars, like, fucking like going ninja rich, all that type of stuff. Well, you're gonna attract gold digger doing that. So on the one hand, it's like, okay, well, you think that by maximizing the number of options, you're gonna actually get the right option, but not only you will have the paradox of choice because you have too many options, but on the top of that, it will be even harder for you to discern what type, the right type for you. So it makes sense, even though on the surface level or on basic optics, it doesn't. And just to say, just for me, for example, whereas before I used to looking at grinding the tables, but now I'm just like, think about it this way. Imagine, right? I'm on, let's say, I don't know, Poker Stars, right? And I go into the cash game thing, right? I would just open all the fucking cash game tables almost, right? But now I'll be looking at, okay, well, what are the percentage of playing? Oh, this guy is an NL reg. I don't know. Or too many NL regs on that one, or like, what's the average pot, per 100 hands, and all that type of stuff. So the point I'm saying is, you become much more narrow in your approach. And for me now, I don't see many girls if at all, because most I know exactly the criteria that I want, and then because otherwise I know I'm wasting my time.
Sure. I think it's more complicated with dating for a few reasons. In poker and in business, the useful thing is that people are more in the habit of thinking this ways, and it's just a bit easier to build metrics and things like that. But I think for dating, it's really tough to build metrics on a lot of different behaviors. But as an example of what we're talking about, have you ever read this book, Don't Trust Your Gut? Do you know this author?
No, but it seems like going against what I say. Trust your gut. Go ahead.
What's that?
Tell me.
Well, I
It
think
goes against my way because I said, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think in dating it does work in a sense to trust your gut, but not in like. Well, I don't even know to be honest, actually, because he seems to say it sort of doesn't. But I think he just discovered more like an overlying life principle. For one thing, he says that basically the whole success of a relationship was just dependent on how happy both partners were. But he also said that a big part of it was that the gorgeous people do wildly better than basically everyone else on both sides. Makes sense. We all
Mm-hmm.
know that, or at least we should. And then beyond that, the only thing that really worked was essentially to niche down, which means to kind of market yourself towards a niche. But he didn't really go into the whole strategy of what that might look like. In business, it's built out. In poker, it's built out. Like you can more or less figure this out. It's very like straightforward. In dating, not really. What the fuck are each of the niches? And I've like kind of, huh? Well, I've done
I can tell you. I can tell you, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I want you to say in a moment. I just want to say a couple other things. I personally have
Mm-hmm.
experimented doing things that are wildly polarizing. It seems to
Mm-hmm.
not work very well on Instagram, but I've still gotten like people to message me and things like that out of the blue, just not at a high frequency. And I'm doing things are very polarizing, and I'm wondering if it's like too polarizing. I think with women, it's a little bit more straightforward, just because it's really hard to say because I'm not a woman. Just because, I mean, guys are going to go after women like pretty much no matter what. It doesn't matter if they don't have to be fucking perfect in every single way, whereas men kind of do. There's a lot of like bizarre barriers and stupid things that go on in society that seem like they create a lot of false negatives. But again, I can't. I'm not in the mind of women. I don't 100% know, which I think is an important theme. Um, One thing I do that really, I think long term actually does. My personal guess. No one. There's a couple things that people never really talk about that obviously have a massive effect. Um, I personally think that the makeup is creating shitloads of false positives, right? Like, if you think about it, if you attract more people, a lot more people than you're interested in, first of all, they're not going to be attracted to the real you. And secondly, you're going to have to say, like, yeah, I mean, they're not attracted to the real you. So even if they are attracted, they're going to dump you at some point when they know what the real you is like. And so it seems like, I mean, it's hard to. I understand all the pressures that cause women to do many of these things. It just seems like in the long run, they might actually be doing some harm. But I can't make decisions for them. They're very stupid. And it's just a suspicion. It just seems like something no one really talks about when considering these things. Like all the like very obvious things that are going to lead to some sort of disruptivity later on. Why don't you talk about the niches that you're referring to? And any,
Yeah.
yeah, your turn. Go ahead.
No. But and then I'll go on with what you said afterwards because I think there's a couple of things worth jumping on. So the way I say to guys, right? Like, because for me, I had a fit in the red pill, I had a fit in the black pill, right? So the black pill is very much looks focused, right?
Right.
So in the black pill, they just say looks everything, looks is everything. Okay.
Well, we know that's bullshit. That matters a lot.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, for me, because I'm lazy, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna test it a bit like Elia, right? So I was like, before, like, I started as a game guy, right? I started as a game guy. I'm like, hey, look, doesn't really matter and everything. Yeah, I'm 6'2", it does help, right? But I was like, so I had to work on my weight, etc., etc. Then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm the black pill. I was like, you know what? Game doesn't matter. I'm just gonna be there and just kind of do the least effort. And I basically got rid of 80% of my success. And I was like, oh, well,
Shit.
I didn't change that much. And actually, and the funny thing is, I lost more weight and I was more in shape in my black pill days than in my game days. So I'm just like, what's wrong, right? But what I've learned through this, and that's, for example, I'll give you an example, right? You still have your hair. I don't, right? Before I used to have white men's hair. And I used to attract more white girls, right? Then when I shaved, people started to assimilate me to the more blacker side, right?
Oh,
And
really?
then I started attracting, and then I started to attract pugs, fat ass white girls, and I was like, no, don't. So archetypes and niche and personas, right? So archetypes are, let's say, they are generally very successful with girls. Three main archetypes, right? And then there are, then you can segment in niche per archetypes, right? So the first one is a pretty boy. You find them on TikTok. You find them like, they're very effeminate, but they've got very fine traits, right? Think of Timothée Chalamet, right? Then you have the typical Chad, right? It kind of like appeals to the white masses, but it doesn't necessarily have anything any edge, but it looks pleasing to the eyes. Think of the guys that plays in Star Trek. What's his name? The actor that plays in Star Trek.
Leading
Chris
Kurt?
Pine. Chris Pine. Do you see Chris Pine?
Chris Pine.
Yeah.
Chris Pine. Let me see this. Chris Pine. Okay. That is the leader. Okay. Yeah, like
the lead character, right?
Yeah. Well,
Right.
the leader of the
And then
Trek is probably killing it, to be fair.
I mean, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, right? But you get the idea. It's kind of like the typical type of chat face, right? And then you have the hypermasculine, right? The hypermasculine, let's say we can call it Jason Statham, or like the guys that play Jason Momoa, the Khal Drogo type of stuff, right? So not necessarily as pleasing on the eyes from the finer traits of the let's say of the pretty boy, or even of the chat, but he compensates that with more manhood, masculinity. Generally, what you'll tend to find is the younger girls will prefer the pretty boy, and as they get older, they prefer the hyper masculine guy. So for you as a guy, in order to maximize, in order to niche, that's the first stage of niche. You will have to understand, okay, well, where do I feed the most in order for me to maximize the market response? Then you have some niches, which is, for example, the dope boy, right? Let's say the gentleman, the artist, the skater boy, I'm just saying that just off top of my head. And what they do is that you will segment yourself in the market where, for example, now a lot of things are driven by communities. People love to go and do stuff in communities by the thing they like, hobbies and everything. So the moment that you start to market yourself in that segment, you can do better as a single person. Let's say, for example, you're a 5 or you're a 6 on the looks, but because you within that community and you embrace that community codes, you may be a 5 or 6, but then you become a 7, potentially even an 8. But what's important as a guy, if you're not a Chad, is you want to maximize your niche in order for you to maximize your charm. Because you can be good looking, but you have no edge, meaning that you have no charm. Therefore, you don't have that pulling factor. Whereas you can be average looking, but there is that something, that quirk about you that, for the girl to really like. I don't know what's about him, but I really like him. And that actually can make you more attractive to a single girl than a Chad. And that's something that's not discussed very often. And that's the idea behind niche. And on the second bit, which what you were talking about basically you have an over demand, right? An oversupply of demand from guys towards girls that it drowns. Yeah, can be also for guys, but let's say, for example, a 5 on Tinder will get way more likes than, let's say, even an 8 as a guy on Tinder or whatever dating apps. So you find yourself overwhelmed with demand and you cannot filter through. So makeup is one of the variables. It's also about the flattening of the world, meaning by that there's so much, people have got so many platforms to go on to in order to create and to receive that demand. Mm-hmm. That even if you're not that great as a girl, you find yourself with completely overloaded with demand and you don't even have time to do stuff for yourself. Like, how many days can you? So now the most important thing as a girl right now is to screen out guys. Mm-hmm. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my points.
Yeah. Well, they have a massive filtering problem. They don't know how to navigate it at all. Like, it's kind of advanced stuff, because if you think about it, now they need to learn this fucking idea of like, how do I target the right audience? But it's a business like way of doing things, but they're fucking some 22-year-old girl who doesn't have to work for anything, and now they have to do this tough thing that is intellectually above most people in the first place. And then, not to mention, the other side is also retarded. Excuse me, my language. It's also very stupid.
No, that's fine.
Against people who have mental disabilities, I just forget to say that sometimes. And then this is part of what's causing like a mass issue, in my personal opinion. What you said about the niches makes a lot of sense to me, and this is actually what Seth Davidowitz said, and he also broke a very common myth that I personally found out to be false the hard way, which is that, like I said, a lot of my experience kind of really breaks a lot of these common things that people say. But they say like, okay, well, if you want to be high quality, if you want to attract high quality, you've got to be high quality yourself. Makes sense, right? And there's truth to that in a way, but it's really not at all the whole story. And he even went into this and said, oh, maybe you follow the typical dating advice. Maybe you start dressing better and start doing all these things to be better and all of that. And you found that it didn't really help you that much in your dating life, which is pretty much exactly what happened to me. I almost thought of every single way I could improve myself. I was going through this kind of really obnoxious heartbreak and trying to get over this fucking girl that drove me crazy. And I thought, okay, well, I thought it was me at the time. It wasn't as much me as I thought. It was actually mostly her, or just whatever. I ultimately concluded, but basically I said, okay, I'm going to like solve all my problems. I'm going to like become more confident. I'm going to go on a million dates. I'm going to have better game. I'm going to have better manners. I'm going to be a gentleman. I'm also going to dress better. I'm going to go in the gym all the time, get ripped, etc. Like, you name it. I did fucking everything you can imagine. and it barely helped me. Like a little bit of game helped me, I think. There's certain things that help me much more than others, but yeah, I would say it helped me a bit. But the curve was weird, partly because the market was not, in my opinion, the market was shifting a lot because of online dating. Maybe my game wasn't as
Mhm.
good as I thought as well. But I found that as time went on, I started to realize that, as it was suggested, there's a bit of a funneling issue. Just a lot of girls didn't give a fuck. And it didn't matter how good. It didn't make one difference that I offered to like pour their glasses, that I had good manners, except for very specific situations, that I had empathy in various situations and that kind of thing, and made sure it was shown. Maybe I just sucked at it or something, but I swear it didn't make one fucking difference. And what seemed to matter the most was just almost the girl's ethnicity. That mattered a ton. And where I was, that mattered way more than anything else almost. I did terrible in LA somehow. And my results actually went back in LA. I did worse. And this was, I think the reason really was I was doing pretty good when it was on lockdown in LA. I was pulling
Mhm.
quite a bit. And then when there wasn't lockdown, I guess the competition, the gates blew open, and whatever else happened with online dating was working against me. And I just all of a sudden was just some guy that these LA girls didn't give a shit about. But if I went to other cities such as Miami or London, even like
Mhm.
even pretty tough cities, I still did fine, and it didn't seem like it hurt me nearly as much. I also started experimenting with just like opening up my Tinder in various locations, and I found that I had far greater success in some areas than others. Even within the U.S., Miami and LA is a really big difference, personally for me, and in the UK, it changed a lot. Even in Australia, actually. As I said, I don't really know
Mhm.
why, but uh, a lot of guys that I know struggle in LA. I don't really know what's going on. Maybe just you have to be a celebrity, whatever it is, or they're just not interested in white guys. But basically, the moral of the
No,
story was, huh?
no. I mean, you're a celebrity to some extent. I mean, like honestly, well, to most guys that knows poker.
Well, if we're trying to pull guys, then I've got that covered. Okay, pull nerdy guys. All right, if that was my thing, fantastic. Yeah, and well, I can tell you some of the demographics I did well with. I'm
Mhm.
trying to think. What I basically found was that, as the guy said, it just really made more sense to figure out your marketing strategy and your funnel, which is also like a whole business concept. It's actually a poker concept
Mhm.
too, except most poker people don't really think of things that way. But you can approach poker in that way. And actually, now I'm trying to teach people in poker to approach things that way if they're really thinking about making money, because being really, really good at poker is kind of, it's the equivalent of sorts of being really, really having really, really good game and just be really good at everything in dating. But that's not going to get you the best results. What's going to get you the best results is to filter for, what you're really looking for somehow, and like know what they're looking for, and also not to mention being really, really visible for that group. Because if you're not, you're fucked, right? So you need to somehow, like, the way of curating that might be getting in the right social circle, or traveling somewhere, whatever it is, or going on the right online sites. There's various different methods, but no, they don't really focus nearly as much on the marketing aspect of things than they do like the whole game stuff. I think the whole like inner game and all, like having good manners and what else, all these things they say to improve about yourself, like working out or whatever, that matters more for keeping the person that you want and not fucking it up. But I don't think that it really, I think just it's not gonna like turn the right, it's just not going to click the right buttons for the right audience, in my opinion. It's not really going to change anything for people that's just not into you for whatever reason. And so it makes sense to focus on whatever that audience is. And one thing, another that people often don't really talk about as well, is that a lot of different people just have different buttons that push them. Like, this has to be the
Yeah.
case, right? Like, I don't know how much you've experienced of this, but just certain girls are looking for certain things, like status, for example. Some are looking for status, of course. That's the red pill, right? Some are looking for someone who's really funny. But some girls, I personally guess that some girls are not turned on at all by a guy who's really funny if they're just not into them. But I could be wrong about that.
Mm.
That I
It's
don't
like,
know. And then some girls have a type, a physical type, some don't. And then Some really like intelligence, some really like nerdy guys, some really like black guys, and good luck trying to change that or appeal to the guys that really like black guys if you're a white guy. It's my personal
It's
guess what's really going on.
and you touched on very key important subject, right? Like for example, on the funny bit, right? Some
Um,
people will find sarcasm very funny. Some
mhm,
others won't find it funny. It's about understanding again what you were saying about the trigger points, right? And the same
mhm,
thing about types. Why they say archetypes? There are going to be archetypes that are going to be liked by some woman, but at the same time, because you're polarizing yourself, it's not going to be liked by some other one. Same thing, right? Like some people will love call over bets. Some people will just hate call over bets, right?
mhm,
So, but yeah, the one thing also you'll notice as well that there are some demographics that you do very well in, and some you don't do very well in because there are some traits, etc. And that's the way for me. I tell guys to when you address the market, right? Like once you understand what you like in a girl, right? You like something about girls are cool. Then you have to segment it in three tier, right? You have tier one, the girl that likes you, right? Yeah, tier two, the girl that are kind of like on the fence, meh, right? And you have tier three, which is like not gonna happen, right? And it's the same thing. Like thing is, and game technically is about will help you get those tier well, not all, but some of those tier two girls because they just need a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a ushering, a little bit more confidence, right? In terms of the way you run the date and everything. But really, tier one, you don't need that much game. It's almost like they're almost hanging themselves on the plate, right? But the funny thing is, you have to learn with tier two how to optimize with tier one in order to make it even simpler and even better. Like we're talking about inner game once it comes to keeping the relationship. Same thing, right? They help you, those two tier two girls, to be better as a guy when it comes to your communication, your behavior, etc. But once
mhm,
you have actually done the tier two girls, you know that your tier one is what you want. And I'll just make the link with poker, right? It's like, that some of the most sophisticated move you'll have to play against regs and good regs, right? But this
mhm.
is not where your money is made. Your money is made with recreational players.
It's made in the
Right?
soft games. Made doing fucking three betting rivers as a bluff or whatever, check raising
Yeah,
or all,
it's like yeah,
trouble.
four bet fold on the on the fucking big blind. Like it's like if you imagine like it's like, and that's something that some game guys will just focus on and keep on. They'll be like they'll use a solver and think, okay, well, what range of cards should I play in a situation where there's a gun raise when I'm the big blind? I'm like, how many fucking time will you find yourself in that situation? And then afterwards, instead of looking at what range are you going to play on the button and all that type of stuff, because this is where you're going to make the most money. So the point is, it's like you must not, as a guy, forget where you want to, where you want to place your time, your investment in, because as you said, like a girl will have positive prejudice if you're her type or if she likes you for some reason, and you have to reward them. That's the most pragmatic thing that I'd say as a guy that you need to do.
Sure. I mean, some girls also. I mean, one thing that they talk about a lot in there's a couple books that come to mind. One was Attached, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
actually, this guy Wheat Waffles had a bit of a similar idea. That's what you're talking about. He came to the. It seems like everyone's kind of coming to the conclusion that also, yeah, even like the guy who taught me came to the conclusion of with the right girl, we don't really need all this crazy game stuff. And I found that to be true too. Like actually with my ex girlfriend, man, I had like no game, dude. We barely talked to each other. That's what's so funny. But it worked. Like I wasn't leading. I wasn't doing anything, man. I didn't know shit. And I was needy, I like was jealous. I had all kinds of problems. Is the funny thing, but it worked. She was from Eastern Europe and she just made it work, man. And she was fucking hot. What can I say? I thought she was real super hot. And the irony was, I learned all this other stuff. And my game just improved massively since then. And then I started wondering, like, wait, what's the point of? It seemed like a lot of it isn't always necessary. Is kind of overkill in some spots, especially dealing with avoidant types, for example. You know what I'm talking about? Or people that are girls.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I made a joke on Twitter. She's not avoidant; she's just avoiding you.
that could
Like
be.
avoiding, like I'm
Yeah, yeah.
joking when I say this, right? I'm joking. It's more like just for trolling purposes, right? Yeah, no, I
Well,
understand because this is the anxious avoidant, the fearful avoidant, stuff, you know.
oh well, for sure.
So
There's
yeah,
loads of people who, think the other person's avoidant, and they are just avoiding avoiding you. Uh, but it might be the case also that even the avoidants are pushing 99.9% away, but there's just 0.1% of people that they're not pushing away, and that's like basically them saying that they're choosing someone. That's just how they work. Uh, but you can play a million games with avoidant people and like really navigate all the bullshit and be a massive pain in the ass. As I personally learned from my experience, and I got fucked anyway, of course, and I pulled back the
me too.
avoidant. Oh yeah, you did that? Oh man, I had the craziest seesaw story with this one girl. I like got her back like 4 fucking times over the course of years,
Mhm.
and then did everything right and still got fucked. Oops.
It's almost like let me try and find like a poker analogy for that thing, right? It's like imagine like you're on a poker tournament, right? You're in run, you're in a deep run. Every time you get mid stack, like average stack size, and you're on the flip, and then you go back to 10 or 15 big blind, and you're like, and then you have to grind, you have to play short stack strategy, right? And then you get another, and then you win the next flip, and you're like, yeah, mid stack again, right? And then you come around like the two last tables before before the final table, and then when you're just about to go to the final table, you get busted, and you're like,
Is that what happened?
that's pretty much it. Well, that happened to me on a few tournaments, but yeah, no, just how could I basically sum it up? I get tired of the bullshit. She comes back. I'm like, because I'm invested. I'm like, because I'm invested. I'm like, and I want that to work. You want that to work. All right, yeah, come back, right? And then she feels comfortable. She fucks it up. I'm like, I'm done with this shit. And then she comes back. It's always like that push pull, and it never fucking stop, right? And at the last push pull, I was like, fuck off, I'm done. I don't like it's almost like you just think like you putting a coin in the machine, and then you're like, I'm out of coin because I'm out of energy, and that's it. And there's something that if it's simple, it flows. It should not be like it shouldn't be any different. Like if you have to work for something, then it's because it's not there with people I'm talking with, because the people that you attract right in your day-to-day life, you didn't work to get them. They just came in. And even before you were famous, even before you were that successful, right? They just came in naturally. Same thing with women. But people are so desperate to try to problem solve a situation that doesn't need solving. Like there's this saying by this French politician, dead, right? It's like there are no problems that the absence of solution doesn't solve. Needless to say, he didn't do much in his political career. But that's another matter. That's another matter.
Not a very compelling selling point. I suppose one of the weird issues. Yeah, the book Attached really goes into this, and they cover this idea of like, yeah, like if you're trying to pull the avoidant person, you should do this, this, and that, but you're kind of wasting your time if you're thinking about things in terms of time and like lack of stress, and not thinking about terms of like optimizing for how many pulls that you get, which I think often the red pill, etc., forgets is they're optimizing for lays a lot of the time. And a lot of what they're doing is, in fact, pretty good for optimizing for lays, but it doesn't appear to make that much of a difference when considering the probability of a long-term successful relationship, meaning that you can still fuck up a bunch of lays and get a similar amount of long-term relationships as someone who got the same amount of lays is what seems to be the case. And I don't see anyone like really going into those sorts of statistics or trying to prove that. This is suggested, by the way, by Neil Strauss when he says at the end of the book The Game that he just used his stupid AFC line and it worked on the girl, right? He basically implied he didn't need all the bullshit to attract the girl, or wasn't really sure, and like somehow it worked with this one particular girl. And I mean, that's my personal suspicion is that it's a lot of the stuff does get more short term success, but it doesn't really optimize for more long term success unless you basically just you become a better version of yourself. But I don't know. It's just my personal guess from having done a lot
Yeah.
of shit. And then a lot of stuff might just be jumping through hoops.
On this, so like it's interesting you say this. So I'll just go back onto the FC line, the AFC average frustration for people if you don't know what that means. That worked perfectly well on that girl, right? The thing is, it's never about the line that you use; it's about the energy where it's coming from. Meaning by that, you can say the most stupid shit whatsoever. If it comes with confidence, if it comes with the right aura, with the right, as you said, better version of yourself because you've worked internally, right? And everything that it's a bit like just be yourself, right? When you just be yourself, but you're needy, you're insecure, you have a lack of self-belief and everything, well, it's not a great selling point, right? But then once you go through the problem, right, and you've gone through all the tips and tricks of game before going on to red pill, right, you realize actually just be yourself was the right point, but you had to go through all the it's a bit like a horseshoe, right? And when it comes to red pill, right, in terms of optimizing lay, right, like, okay, fine. Thing is, technically, what red pill is co-opting hypergamy from a woman, which is, okay, well, looks, money, status. We just that's what the woman wants. That's what we're gonna offer, right? Okay, fine, fair enough. You will get, let's say, your frontline communication is gonna be great because you're gonna appeal to those, right? But if you don't have the means in order to sell, because what you're doing technically is just marketing. If you don't have the means to sell yourself as an individual, not only for the lay, but as well for the long-standing part of the relationship, because you just focus on gaining attributes rather than actually learning about yourself, that's where you're going to lack. And that's what you're saying originally, which was, it's not because you may fumble a lot of lays not optimizing through red pill that you will get less lower proportion of girls than the red pill, because technically you not having done all those what the red pill says won't change the fact that you're still going to attract the right person for you, because those that you manage to get lays with the red pill by widening the scope of potential suitors through those attributes, we're actually never going to be with you regardless for you. Is that what you're saying? Did I sum it up all right?
Yeah, I would say that's the case. I've noticed, to be honest, things like status, etc., do solve the first problem, which is they have to somehow filter through all the fucking random guys. If someone's really good looking, that's the easiest filter on the planet, right? Because it's just like, okay, this guy's really good looking. And by the way, Tinder essentially has nudged, a huge percentage of women to filter for this particular way, which probably eventually fucks them in the long run, literally and figuratively. Fucks them a lot. And uh, but yeah, like I see how the red pill stuff has totally like these are these attributes which they from their friends or the media or whatever has like said that they should look for, and like they're obviously positives that make the guys who have these stand out from other guys. But at least from my observations, etc., for some reason the red pill doesn't consider all the all the variants of what happens, because if the red pill is right, people just like kind of line up and go after the highest status person, right? And just be constantly shifting from person to person. I mean, you see this a bit in sometimes, but not super fast, especially it's not definitely not 100% too. As an example, even in Ukraine, still after the war, 30% of the wives of women stayed with their husbands. I mean, yeah, 70% left, but there's still 30% that fucking stayed in the war with Ukraine. So it's still saying, okay, something's clearly not about the status, that we're not like a 30% is a big percent in a fucked up situation. It's kind of a doomsday situation, basically. Um, yeah, and there's loads of variance in between all that, and for sure there's someone can find examples of girls that are staying with guys that have less status with them, at least in theory. And then like, how are we figuring out the status like equation here? Is it purely? It seems like for whatever reason people have decided, okay, it's based off of money and how many people they know, I guess. And but yeah, like it seems like the other things are really what ultimately bind people together. People don't really talk about the pair bonding mechanism as well, which is code for love. It's the technical term for love, and the red pill just doesn't seem to account for that at all. I don't really know a whole lot about that myself, except that it exists and that it must be based on things that maybe you have some insights into that one. I haven't seen anyone really talk about that. They always talk about like, oh, status and like money. You gotta have like top 1% wealth, have over
Mhm.
100K, 6 foot, like that kind of shit, but not
Yeah,
how the
it's
the pair bonding mechanism works.
yeah. So surface level shit, right? Surface level shit. Like thing is, for example, if you look, they mentioned, for example, Dark Triad, right? Because it's kind of like like the dark side of game, where you push the logic of the push pull of game to a wider extent, where the ups of the pool is higher and the down of the push is way lower, right? So that
Mhm.
what it does is that but game just kind of like works on the surface, right? But when you go into the dark side of game, no, because I'm writing a book on this, right? When you go on the dark side of game, it's like you realize that the logic behind what originally attracts a woman, if you extend that logic to the wider spectrum, this is what like what you were talking about, the avoidant, right?
Mhm.
If you have a very secure attachment style, right? I mean, I don't really like the terminology behind the attachment, but if you have a very secure attachment style, you'll find yourself at a loss with an avoidant because you're like, what's happening, right? Like just because you project your own way of attaching to people.
Mhm.
But the way what they do technically is they will often be confused to be somewhat of a narcissistic person because they'll give you crumbs when you basically pull away, and then
Mhm.
either they won't say much or they'll be kind of a bit like looking down on you for you trying to understand them because they don't understand them themselves, because technically it's a way to better hide their insecurity. And when you look at the attachment methods, why, for example, trauma bonding is such a big thing is that it works on the uncertainty and the anxiety created once the investment is there. Meaning
Mhm.
by that, first you need the investment, and that is
Sure.
generated by the time you spend together, by the level of connection you have, etc., etc. So people,
Mhm.
it's a bit like a drug, right?
Yeah, yeah, I get
Then
it.
you
You
withdraw it.
then you
It's
take it away, so they feel like the loss and shit. They're thinking, "Fuck, I really want that back." Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, but it can even go with gambling, right? Like you don't know when the next time you're gonna hit the big win, right? And then when you get that big win, that positive reinforcement is so good that you're just thinking, "Oh, I'm on the strike." Then you go loss, and that's how people get addicted to gambling. It is there's the same process of attachment. So yeah, but yeah, the red pill doesn't talk about that. It's more on the game side, on the psychological side, a bit on the communication side. But yeah, no. I wanted to ask you this actually. Did you? Uh, I think you said to me that you wanted to challenge me on some ideas and everything, and I'm not sure if you already did or if you want to on things that you don't necessarily agree with me. I
It's more
invite you
like
to do that. So.
Well, it's more like I saw some tweets of yours and I thought, well, some tweets I thought, wow, this guy's really on point, and some tweets I wasn't really sure, or some tweets I didn't 100% agree with, but I don't remember precisely what they
Mhm.
were. I think I'll take a guess. And by the way, as a side note, with the gambling addiction, one of the I, I don't know how to cure it. I will say that about 3% of the population has it, from my knowledge, and that
Mhm.
there's a big difference in how people process emotions to get addicted. But basically, the people that respond more negatively to loss tend to be more professional than the ones who respond more positively to success. That's what leads to addiction, is having they'd be responding more positively to success. And I guess you could say,
Hold on. Can you just repeat that because I'm not sure I understood it potentially. So
okay,
the
so
people that are more positive to the loss are more likely to be addicted.
the people that respond more positively to success, because imagine what has to happen for someone to get addicted by definition,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they have to weigh the positive experiences of the upside disproportionately to the negative experiences, right? So they have to weigh somehow the positive experiences in extreme, such that it overwhelms the probabilistic downside in aggregate of the losses, right? Because they're going to lose like
Mm-hmm.
way more than they win, and the wins just got to feel better. And this is what they found in theory is that, or excuse me, in research is that the addicts they they respond much more positively to success than do the people who become professionals. The professionals have the opposite situation. They respond more negatively to loss, generally speaking, than the typical people in the population. So that's an important distinction between the degenerates and the people who end up being professionals. Somehow you can override that a bit, right? But
Yeah.
that's the general theme of what happens between pros and non-pros.
But even in the poker world, where you have a people that, let's say, especially if you're focusing on tournaments where the variance plays such a big part, you can have your big payday early, but you didn't set up the right type of you know, mentality in terms of bankroll management, where people will overestimate their ability and think that they prefer playing their back against the wall versus underscoring their ability to make sure they last. What would you say has been what would you say is the most common point amongst the pros that you know and are not broke or relying on backers?
There's a few different factors. One of which, where I differentiate myself between others, is that, and this is advice that I don't take, and I don't exactly. I advise it depending on what someone's goals are, but one is introducing more outside variables, like such as the more people that you deal with and the more markets that you deal with anyway. But I've taken personally the opposite approach, and that's just me partly because my ambitions are quite high in comparison to other people. But if people want to have like a stable income and have reliable success, they shouldn't like start dealing with loads of different people, and they should be very cautious and do a lot of due diligence between dealing with those people. I don't advise a strategy for multiple reasons, again depending on what someone's trying to do. If, like I said, if stability and lack of if stability and predictability of your success is what you're looking for, this is what you do, and you don't like you don't like travel a lot, you don't like try to play in Asia, you don't like try new games, like that kind of thing, but you'll have a very
Mhm.
boring future. And actually, it's, in my opinion, it's more plus EV to have an element of trust in your ways of dealing with money and in life than it is to be overly conservative. However, having too much trust is very risky because there's lots of bad people out there, of course. But definitely,
Mhm.
trust is something that's needed individually to have extreme success and collectively as a society in order for the society to grow. So the irony is what I just described is the typical poker pro in many different ways, but the uh, I don't advertise what they say. Most people have a very low difference between most people trust not easily, and that happens to be good
Mhm.
for retaining your equity, but not for growing, especially in extremes. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing is that they should be a bit cautious in getting cocky and having and like retain and not losing their bankroll and having extreme like higher buy-in amounts than what is typical. They should do things like invest in the market. A lot of boring stuff, basically. Buy properties and rent them out. That's not too bad anyway. You can make like 15% a year, by the way, in Las Vegas, buying
Mhm.
properties and renting them out. Pretty good.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a lot of things that like almost guarantee your success if you're pretty good at poker. You can definitely become a millionaire if you're like beating 510 live. Probably 5% of the population has that potential, 5 to 10%, I think. Well, 5 to 10% and want to do it. Let's put it that way. I would
Mhm.
say, well, really realistically, 5%. Because there's for sure
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
10% is going to want to do it. To answer your question,
Okay. And out of curiosity, well, I mean, I've got three questions here for you. They're personal, but do you think that there is a correlation between the IQ and the ability to succeed in poker?
for sure, the more analytical you are, the better. But that's probably true about a lot of things. Being analytical is really useful these days. Yeah, there's definitely a correlation. Someone will need at least, yeah, probably be at least like top 20% to be able to beat high stakes. I think that
Mhm.
beat high stakes like the tough games. Excuse me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that People can have lots of success without that though, but they'll have to like, I don't know to what extent it correlates, but they'll have to, I mean, maybe they can use their social skills to get into better games. Like that you can be just good at
Hmm.
being social. Like you can, you can be an influencer or whatever. There's a lot of different ways. You don't have to be. There's a few people who have extreme success and they're not like fantastic poker players these days. Now, it might even be a bigger asset, by the way. IQ is definitely not
Hmm.
everything. And if
Hmm.
someone works hard enough, yeah, they can be a top player, I think. That's my personal guess. I'm sure there's a few different
Hmm.
examples where people did not have any clear talent and they just did whatever and it worked out really well for them.
So basically, be social at the same time. So let's say, for example, if you're not on the top bit of the IQ and that you're not a really, really hard worker, but you're good enough to clean up in the right tables, in the right environment, the right social, like focus on that social skill, focus on being charismatic, etc. In terms of, it seems. So, sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. It's not just charisma, but that seems to help. It's also it's a bit, to be honest, of just putting yourself out there and trying to meet the right people. Like that, it matters more than, in my opinion, than charisma. It's just the
Hmm.
politics and the actual assertion
Mm.
into the environment. It's not like the charisma helps, but I
Yeah,
mean,
of
also
course.
different things work for different kinds of charisma work for different people. There's something to be said for the niching that we talked about for attracting different types as
Mhm.
well. Not everyone's going to like you, but I can think of a bit of an example that actually like kind of, I don't like this lady, but there's this lady who's a perfect example who's not successful in poker, but she's successful in just building her brand and just like getting in the right networks. And even she said it. Her name's Hoffet Golan, and she has the most perfect boyfriend of all time. I love this guy. He seems like the perfect fucking man in many ways, or not quite perfect, but
Mhm.
like a very very high quality. Let's say like in my opinion, he's like one in a like fucking 800 million or some crazy amount. Like he's legit
Yeah.
like a celebrity, a level, like in terms of virtue or whatever is a level celebrity. But Hoffet, in my opinion, has a fucking obnoxious personality, and she's not that hot either, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
she just like asserts herself in like loads of situations and just puts herself out there. There's loads of people that fucking hate her, right? Like I would like block her everywhere personally. Like she's like stolen money from me, but because she puts herself out there, I mean, she's a hot, pretty attractive girl, I guess. She's like 40 right now,
Mhm.
but that's what's opened doors for her more than she's not charismatic, in my opinion, or at least
Mhm.
she's maybe charismatic to some, but she's extremely noxious to me. I would never tolerate her personally. I could
Yeah.
not. I don't understand how he's chosen her, but okay. It's like this is kind of the point is that like
The greatest mystery.
more than how charismatic you are. Someone's gonna like you,
Yeah.
and there's examples in poker too that I don't really want to mention,
Yeah,
but
of course.
really that's the move.
All right. So assertion is a big thing. Yeah, no, no, no. It's that's actually a very good thing because a lot of people are very passive, and it's funny because we made a video, me and 007, the other guy I work with, right? Be aggressive in your approach because anyway. And so
Just
that's the
keep
first
trying.
bit. Okay. Yeah, keep trying. The second bit, I'm almost 100% sure, and you tell me because you're a guy that likes research. I can tell you're a guy that likes research, that likes to gather data, etc., etc. Right? Have you done your MBTI? Because I think I know which MBTI you are.
Which type?
So you've done it, right? I think that you're an INTP.
You got it. I'm very close between INTP and INTJ though.
Okay, okay, okay. Now that's you see, that's like I can tell because it's like INTP likes to create, like not create, but like try to find the problem, solve it, etc. But you don't have that so much like that J side, which is very judgmental, and like you like to ponder things a bit. That's why, but that's that confirmed it. That's confirmed it.
Well, I
Yeah,
also like to I also like to find solutions, and if I do
yeah.
am really certain of a solution, I'm really fucking certain. Right. If I like until
Uh,
someone says something that goes against it, I'll be really certain. Let's put it that way. Sometimes that's happened. But yeah, I mean, tend to form bodies of knowledge independent of what everyone else says, which is more of an autistic thing, I guess. And that's kind of what led me to this whole idea of questioning a lot of what's going on in dating and making me, giving me to realize that there just needs to be a lot more nuance of what's going on. And really, another thing, actually, here's a bit of a parallel between the poker world and the dating world, in my opinion, is that for the longest time in poker, everyone thought that poker was this way or that way, and that this was this way of doing things. And then all of a sudden came the simulations, that is, the AI applied to poker, which doesn't have any biases or any hive mind or any of that stupid bullshit that drives people towards stupidity. And it basically showed that everyone was wrong the entire fucking time. It totally revolutionized the entire game, and it showed a lot of different possibilities that people could take. And
Mhm.
since then, people have been playing in a wildly different way. And the reason why I point that out is because it's really easy for society and groups of people to form various forms of hive minds. I think the red pill is one of them. I think the
Mhm.
black pill is one of them. Like, there's clearly counterexamples to both those philosophies, as we mentioned. And then, the
Mhm.
mainstream feminism is broken as well. I mean, the idea of feminism originally was actually good. People don't know this. And so there's actually good feminists out there, as I learned as well. But it's really, really easy for people to just like kind of coagulate into groups and then think in a certain kind of way, and then realize that they're thinking in a certain kind of way. Another very big example is the weird culture. Have you heard of this?
Tell me,
So
weird
weird
culture.
culture. So a lot of the Western culture forgets that not everyone in the world lives like them. In fact, there's loads of populations that don't
Oh.
will live like them. So weird stands for, I think this is Seth Davidovit's book again, but it stands for Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And a lot there's a
Mm.
also forget that the way that they live was not at all how people lived in history. If you start studying history, you'll see some very strange things happening that seem alien to what's going on currently. Like if you study, for example, Chinese history, at some point made no fucking sense, or the culture was really
Mhm.
extreme. In that, if you were to, if like your superior did something that you didn't like, which you would possibly do, is like you would say that you didn't like it, and then you'd like cut off your toes. This is like something that
Yeah,
it's a
that's
joke. There were things like this,
yeah. No, that's
and
but yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I did. I thought
well, another thing is
you
like
were done
dating,
with.
for example, in in the past, and also in various different cultures, and in India, as another example, just looks nothing like it does in the U.S. But even in Eastern Europe, really, it's a lot healthier. At least from what I can tell, I'm not an Eastern European guy,
Mhm.
so maybe it just sucks for those guys. Uh, and it appears in various cultures to be a lot healthier from talking to the women, and you talk to them at some point, and you start to discover that actually there's like some truth to their side as well. It's not all bullshit as the red pill
Mhm.
says. But yeah, like it's very easy to think, okay, this is just the way things are in Western culture, and that's that.
Yeah, like it's very important what you're saying. I mean, like like the weird, so Western educated, industrialized, rich Democrats, right? So the way we talk about it in, like for me, when I study sociology, etc., right, we call it ethnocentrism. Technically, that you
Yeah.
think it from your idea of the West, like, and you start projecting down to other cultures, right? So technically, what you're talking about is about the coastal part of the U.S., right? The East Coast, the West Coast, which generally tend to hoard most liberals, Democrats, etc. Yeah, no, so it makes total sense. And I'll use my experience, right? So I've mostly dealt myself, right, with British girls, a bit of French, not that much, considering I'm French, not that much, right? But there's a massive gap between British and French, right?
Oh, the
But
French girls are good,
but
man. The French and British girls, I think, are
oh
pretty good.
really?
Yeah. You
The French girl, oh man, don't get me started with the French girls. I lost my hair not for that, but it's as if. No, anyway, let's not get off topic. But when and thing is, it's like if you look at just the way I have to approach a British girl versus the way I approach an Eastern European girl is completely different.
Oh
What I
yeah,
mean by
yeah.
that, that's the thing. They're both girls. Don't get me wrong. They both will respond to some things, but the way you communicate is so different. Like the British girl will want some banter, they'll have a bit of sense of humor. But like the Eastern European one, it will fall flat because they are very dry. Like the thing is, if you're very what you say, what you see is what you get, which is very French-like, like that's fine. But for example, as well, if you want to play Ethel game, that will work with the British girls, but with the Eastern European, it will fall flat. And
Yeah,
for
I
people
noticed that.
that's out in America, you notice, right? But for
Uh,
people that are in America that don't travel, yeah, they don't know.
that's yeah, I found that to be totally true. Another thing related to that, and Root. No, what's his name? What the fuck was this guy's name? It was his name, the Ruse.
Rougevie,
Rouge V. Yeah, he even
Rougevie,
said this
Rougevie.
too. What I'm about to say. Like a lot of what he said makes quite some sense to me. But he said that the best move with women, if you were to like not pick from a demographic, would be to buy them a drink. Actually, it works
Mm-hmm.
great in Europe. At least just unless things have changed, it worked fucking fantastic. And then obviously in
Mm-hmm.
America, they say like never buy a girl a drink, never do this or that for women, and that just like fucks you entirely, or with a huge percent of the population with Americans, or it just doesn't do anything for you. But the whole idea is just the way the culture approaches like an act of generosity is very different in America than it is in Europe. At least in that way, at least the women are a bit more, in my opinion, a bit more entitled or used to. I don't know what it is. Just stepping on guys or something I mostly agree with you on. I think it seemed like your tweets were saying that we're doing this thing where they're saying like all the women are like this or that kind of thing. And I was thinking, well, I've met plenty of women that aren't like this, but they're often not from the US anyway. Maybe they're
Yeah.
biased to me, that kind of thing. But
No,
it
no. I
seems like,
mean,
huh?
obviously, there's a very strong skew towards Western women when I talk about this, right? Like my experience with Eastern Asian, for example, is very low. I cannot talk about them. Like it's the one that I expect most people to resonate with, and also like it's also the problem of the conciseness. Conciseness will always come at the expense of context and nuances, right? Like that's why sometimes I make long forms which explain a bit more, but sometimes it's funny, say women love to travel because they're never happy wherever they are. It's kind of like little type of tongue in cheek with a bit of misogyny, but it's for fun, right? But it's a bit shit posting, but goes to what you were saying about, but I fully agree. Like, and there's also this debate about, okay, well, she's a woman, but she's from that culture, right? How much does the
Mm-hmm.
culture drive the change in a woman versus the nature of woman? And there's a debate, right, where I personally stand that 80% remains the same, but 20% will vary in the sense of, and the 20% is how you approach it. But it's about how you angle yourself, even though the value points remain the same. Say, for example, you're on a poker table, right? You know
Mm-hmm.
that you're gonna win 80% of the time when you have one over pair over another one. Like, let's say you've got aces, the other person got kings.
Kind of
Um,
dreams, by the way. Overpair was over.
sorry,
Great.
what? It's
Overpair versus
poker.
over. Fantastic
Oh,
situations. Get that.
I know, right? Yeah, that's it. You rather base. That's why I hated calling was mid. Like 8, 7, 6, and all in, because
Kind
I
of,
just was so afraid of all. Sorry.
yeah, you're kind of right actually, because like combinatorically, it's like not that hard depending on the action. And people underbluff. They mean they bluff too little. So they can have if you have eights or something, you can count. That's nines, tens, jacks, queens, aces. I think they did it right. Nines, tens, jacks, queens, aces. Yeah, 5 times 6. That's 30 combinations. So that's a fair bit. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, if they're putting lots of money in, they gotta have quite a few bluffs, which is
yeah,
no big deal. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, but you always want that when you are deep in a tournament. You want that over pair over pair, right? And you don't want to be on the wrong end of the wrong side of it. And I forgot my train of thought, but it's fine, whatever. It's not. I don't think it was that important. It was more out of fun. But what I want to say, and I had a last question um, about you. Now, you mentioned earlier about trust. Like basically compared to your average person, you had a bigger level of trust that enabled you to get exposed to things that you wouldn't have get exposed. So technically, you you went against the general advice, and that did you well. What like if people don't know your story, I'll just make it. I mean, you mentioned it at the beginning, right? But you became pretty much a household name in one of the two main poker house back in the early 2010s, and you basically like completely crushed the limits, and you're more specialized in heads up everything. But what did it take for you to be to achieve that? To be so different to other people. Did you follow the rules that you would read on 2+2 forums, or did you went with your instinct, your gut, something that you knew something was right with you? Like what was it?
That's a good question. I think a big part of it was that um, I didn't conform so much to the same way of thinking. This is useful trait in stocks, for example. The idea is you want to be a little bit of a contrarian, or at least have the capacity to be one, because like somehow the value is somewhere where most people aren't looking, right? And it's in a difficult direction where most people aren't looking, and you need to be able to find that. So that's a big part of it. Another thing that I had was I I hated to lose, which is actually a good thing because it means that you avoid the pain of losing. And I really hated to lose. I was extra sensitive to losing. I have to think of like really what's the core differences that made me different. That definitely pushed me to heights. That's one of the things for sure. And I was constantly pushing my comfort zone in all kinds of ways. I was like a bit more aggressive with my bankroll management, all the above, but not to the. I still wasn't anywhere near Kelly criterion, and I was constantly pushing it in a lot of different directions. The trust thing is also kind of like that, but that's actually a more interesting story. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Mm.
So that increased the variance of my life massively. It's not that obvious. Uh, it's affected my success, you can say. But as far as my success in poker, it's those things. It was also I'm trying to think. A big part was just I think the sensitivity to feeling. I don't know how to like how that would help anyone to say that. Is that's one of the things that differentiated myself. Another thing was, as we mentioned, not being too rigid in what society thinks. That's very important
Mhm.
because we need to do this thing called problematizing, which is changing the way that we look at problems in order to figure out really what the problem is. This is applicable in poker, it's applicable in business, it's applicable in dating because it's you have to think of where to effectively put your effort. Another thing that made me very successful was I just happened to find what my niche was, or a niche that was there very well suited me, and that there was loads of value in. I actually wish that I did it even more so. If I had played and got good at ring poker earlier, I would have made way more money. If I had gone to Euro sites, I would have made or gone to Euro sites sooner. I would have made way more fucking money, like out of this planet money. If I had gotten into crypto earlier, it's all the same principle, right? You have to be open to the various possibilities. If I got into crypto earlier, I made a bazillion more money, which, by the way, a lot of it was stolen. Um, and so, yeah, like if you really think about it, the keys to success are not in digging down one hole narrowly necessarily. They kind of are. That's true.
Mhm.
But at least a big component of that is going in the total opposite direction, more horizontally, and looking at all the variety of possibilities. And at least not having a very too strong of a focus in this direction, in this one direction, and being open to these various possibilities, loosely open. So you want to be constantly testing those codes of possibilities. I did in fact do the tunnel thing, which is what you want to do at some point once you found a real way to go down. I believe actually this is let's see, it's equivalent to. It reminds me of there's this book called Range where it talks about two different approaches that two prodigies made. One was Tiger Woods, and one was Roger Federer. And it said that Roger Federer
Hmm.
basically did what I was talking about. He tried a lot of different things, and then he found tennis, and then he burrowed down towards tennis, right? But Tiger Woods just kind of found tennis straight away and like plowed down that, right?
Hmm.
So I think what would be applicable advice for everyone, and this is what the book Range said, would be to use the Federer approach and try a lot of things varying, and then pick the one that makes the most sense for them to go down, that they see the value in. Because at some point you do need to focus. However, it's stupid to focus too early without seeing the broader spectrum of things. And this is kind of
Hmm.
emulated in Peter Thiel's book, um, Zero to One.
Zero.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He says that competition is stupid. This means is that you don't want to just like make sure you're ultra good at like one thing, and like that's where the value is. The same thing as dating. Like you're not gonna be able to fucking beat the fucking like if you're not gonna beat Tinder if you're not the top 5% attractive guy. That's gonna be a waste of fucking time. Like focusing all your effort on Tinder. You gotta look somewhere else, or you know, try to like pull at a nightclub if you're not very good looking or whatever the fuck. If you're not a nightclub guy, it's retarded as fuck. Or it's very stupid. Excuse me, very stupid.
No, it's
If you're
fine.
not a nightclub guy, to try to crush nightclubs. If I try to crush nightclubs, it's not going to go that well. I think I should do something else.
It's yeah, it's very it's you're mentioning a very key point, right? Like for example, for me, I don't particularly like social media. I mean, I'm on social media, right? But anything, but like if you're not top on Instagram, top on Snapchat, and everything, it's like the Hunger Games, or if it's like Squid Game, right? It's like there's survivorship bias. You see the top guys, but then you don't see all the pretenders, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like as you mentioned, it's like find that key thing where you're better than everyone else, or like
Yeah.
better than 95% of the people. And actually, that's a great segue to my to which is a part of the same question, but we would say, okay, well, what made you that guy in poker, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think that made the biggest impact into your success in your dating life?
Um, that's a tough one. I think. Well, to be honest, I just do much better with some demographics than others for whatever reason.
Mhm.
I think honestly, there isn't. It almost seems like a lot of it isn't really me choosing them; it's them choosing me. If you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
I'm trying to think of what really helped me the most. If in terms of, it would be interesting to go into improving what traits help the most. Like honestly, improving certain traits didn't make a damn difference. My manners only mattered to like this one girl who like I lost this one girl because my manners weren't really right, and then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have manners from this point forward. Didn't make a difference. Didn't make one difference. I thought that a lot of my conversational ability would have changed a lot. Not sort of. It eventually did, but it was a really steep curve, I would say. And even then, I think it mattered less than I imagined. I think the biggest thing that really helped with my approval with women, to be honest, was just sheer, like, just putting myself out there and actually, and not just meeting them, but also just, like, making things sexualized a little bit, just a little bit, or at least being able to gauge whether a girl was ready for that or not. That matters a lot, knowing when to pull the trigger and when not to. Other than that, man, I don't fucking know. Like finding the right way to get them, I would say, or just where to, yeah, more like creating the right funnel, I would say. That matters more than almost everything else. I don't, but I also had success for a very long time. So maybe I just haven't really I've taken that for granted. I've just been used to having money for a long time and used to having a name and all of that. So I've never
Hmm.
struggled with those kinds of problems. And I was always in
Hmm.
like decent
But
shape.
so that's a good question. Was money, knowing that you had a lot of money, massive, massive helper? Or sometimes did you feel like it didn't, like, let's say, because you mentioned you were a bit on the spectrum, did that hold you back a bit? You know what I'm saying?
Give me 1 second.
No worries, no worries. I know we went a bit over time. I was caught up in this
We'll wrap
conversation,
things up
so
shortly.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of so you obviously you were successful for a very long period of time, and you had money, etc. So you had success. So you didn't really feel like there was that much of a mega shift of, like, that hockey stick shot when you're like, oh, I just get it and boom, It was always successful, but like you were always trying to break things down ex post the event, and you're like, okay, well, manners don't really change, like all this, right? Fine. How much would you say that money was a big factor in your success?
With women?
Yeah. And in
Well,
what way?
oh, you know what was another thing? Was this my approach towards confidence? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
what's confidence, I think a lot of what it's hard to for guys to say the right things in terms of being confident and like flipping those switches for women from a low point. But it would be easy to go from not super hard anyway to go from a low point of having lacking confidence to the point of like having enough confidence to not fuck things up. I think I was at a point where I lacked confidence a lot and I just basically realized, wait, I'm just being delusionally irrational. I'm just gonna like assume I'm good enough or act as though I'm good enough, and that fixed quite a lot. Like really, it was just removal of major red flags that helped me quite a bit. And then after that, um, yeah, just it didn't seem like there was a whole lot I could do to pull a large number of women other than focus on just the groups that happen to like me more. For example, the Eastern
Mm-hmm.
Europeans. That's what I personally noticed.
All right. So I'm just going to sum that up and just tell me if I'm wrong. So know your market. Where are you appreciated, not tolerated? Okay, that's the first bit.
I think that's actually
Yeah, good.
one of the biggest things. I don't know what you think, but I don't see how. Okay, I just don't see how other guys are gonna like all of a sudden attract loads of women. I mean, I think the Michael Sartain approach could totally work, but it also just totally increases the whole. It like basically turns yourself all of a sudden onto and to being an option to a bunch of women that you were otherwise invisible to. You see what I'm saying? Like it opens the door
100%.
to a load of them, right? So now the question comes down to who's really your type, and like what are their triggers beyond that. It's kind of like the same thing of like, okay, we walk through the status door, and now what else matters?
Yeah. But the thing, like you want a girl that assumes that you already have that status because she likes you, rather than a girl that you have to prove that you have the status in order for her to like you. Because once the frontline communication is done, you're gonna be in a relationship. But she's gonna be more prone to shit testing you and giving you a hard time than the one that already assumed that you were the shit. And that's
Yeah,
something that people don't talk about.
yeah,
So,
hundred
and
percent.
that's what you meant, right? That's what you
Yeah,
meant. Yeah?
yeah. I mean, like,
Okay.
there's no way
Okay.
around that. If the girl doesn't like, if she's not like 100% sold on you, or like as sold as you, for whatever reason, as some other girls, she's just gonna be harder.
Yeah, I totally agreeing with that. So that's been my experience. Like I was saying to you, those maybe girls, it's fine, it's fun for the challenge, but when you're too tired and you want to go and do something else. So know your market. Money is good, but it's not good enough if you don't have confidence.
Oh
Would you
well,
say that?
I think definitely that's true. I think every guy with money can attest to that being true. Uh, Same with
Okay.
dude. Like, I'm sure it's true about fucking anything, but you just need. I think, to be honest, all you really need to not have is the red flag. If the girl's interested, you just not have to have the red flag of lacking confidence or just putting her off for one stupid reason or another.
And the third one is the sexualization, where before you were maybe a bit too flat on that, and you kind of just alongside with the self belief and confidence that came in, you took on a little bit more leadership of sexualizing things a bit, because in a way it was a perfect litmus test to know whether or not you were a type. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. This like in my experience, I found it very difficult to turn women on if they just weren't interested in the first place. Like it seemed like there's not a whole lot you could do. I suppose if someone's like very charismatic, they could change things. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you could just do a couple little things to test the waters. And I mean, flirting's a very difficult skill to learn. It's one of those things that just I think, yeah, it happens a bit more naturally if they like you too. Um, but it's one of those things like if a girl is not really into you, it's going to be very hard to do it, and it's hard to do it from flat conversation in the first place. And I don't think it really pulls more in the long run, but I don't know.
You again, right? You're gonna pull more by getting more and more exposed. Also, another thing you said, putting yourself out there. So that's four things, right? Know your market, put yourself more out there in those markets, sexualize a little bit more, and build that confidence, because money on its own is not enough in order to make the sale happen. You do the marketing, but if there's no salesmanship, nothing happens.
Well,
Unless
there's
you want
also
to transact.
yeah, there's also something for what guys like Michael Sartain talk about for sure. Like
Mhm.
you definitely need to open up the you definitely need to have you need to somehow differentiate yourself from everybody else. Like at least, yeah, I probably do take this for granted. You need some kind of status in some kind of way. You need to be in the right dating site or in the right social circle or the right event and that kind of thing. Or else if you're just some random guy in the street, you're going to struggle like hell. So it's whatever it is that makes it so that, okay, now a girl realizes she's got to pay attention to you.
So if
Something
you
to
can't be the best,
solve the problem.
differentiate. Exactly. Differentiate yourself. Goes back to the niche conversation and everything. Well, anyway, I don't know what time it is on your end, Daniel, but I mean, I think it was a great podcast. I really enjoyed the back and forth, the parallels. So I'm going to wrap this up on this. Do you have any last words whatsoever before we say bye to those people?
Well, I want to ask you how much do you think status matters? That's really a big part of the question. Is how much do you think the red pill terms matter for women in general? Let's say the Western women and women on the whole, because I'm
Okay.
wondering that myself. Uh, I'm sure if someone was like wildly famous, it would matter a lot. But I think, to be honest, if they're wildly famous for, like, I would think that Elon Musk doesn't get played nearly as much as musicians in various countries. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's my personal
Yeah.
guess. It's not
Okay.
really fame exactly. It's kind
Okay.
of wild. And
So I'll tell you what is the biggest factor of female attraction. That's where Michael Sartain comes in. It's about pre-selection. When you have status, you already
oh,
established pre-selection. Now,
it's
if
very.
you oh yeah, especially with it's like women always expect to have other women to decide for them because they don't want to take accountability and they want to make sure that they're being vetted by someone else. But if you look
Well,
at looks, money, status, yeah, go ahead, go on. You want to say something?
I mean, this is like the biggest thing that makes one guy stand out from another, right? Like, think about it like that. How do we filter through all these random ass dudes? My friend likes this guy, and their friends like this guy, and like the girls like this guy. Like, okay, well there we go. Maybe I like this guy too. It makes loads of sense, also from an evolutionary perspective. Like that might be the most powerful thing is pre-selection. Okay, that gets
Like
around
to,
it.
but but I want to put that versus looks, money, status game, right? Status to me is the most important, 100%. Looks is kind of a status as well, right? And if a girl really likes your looks, she assume your status, but it's not strong, right? Money is good, but status already implies money. But money doesn't necessarily imply status. Difference, right? So the status is more scarce, therefore more valuable. Game is interchangeable, as in it really depends upon what you want, where you place game. So that's my thing. But I agree with you. Status is the most important on everything. So, and that's what Rushdi said. He said in the years to come, and that wasn't in 2010. You'll have to be someone in order to date a girl. But that's kind of like extreme. But you see that now. You have to be someone, not necessarily in the wild world, but in your microcosm. And the other thing goes back to what you were saying about Elon Musk and the musician artist who gets laid the most. Most likely the musician artist, because you can be a tech billionaire, but does that resonate enough with girls? Even though, for example, you're The Weeknd, you resonate more with girls.
Well, this is kind of getting at the point where you're talking about, but remember why they're famous. Yeah, as you said, being a tech billionaire trying to go to the moon isn't going to resonate with a lot of people, a lot of women especially. But being a musician, literally the guy is putting his soul out there. Like that's the number one thing to expose yourself is to be a musician, if you think about it. They literally just expressing his emotions. And so, of course, this is going to resonate with a huge percentage of women who are just emotional. They're looking for guys that they can connect with emotionally. Like that's a big part of what their, you know, big part of what the trigger is. And so, yeah, it makes loads of sense. I would think that even with what we're talking about, of things going beyond just something superficial and like on paper, such as status, but I think just status opens loads of doors. I mean, it opens doors for me with poker chicks and girls that know of poker or like understand it a little bit. It doesn't really open doors for a lot of women, though. Let's put it that way. At least
Yeah.
that specifically. But other things about me do open doors with them. I have a bit of a funny demographic that, or a bit of a variegated demographic, I should say. But yeah, I just wonder. I don't know. I haven't been in the Michael Sarkane situation exactly. I've been in similar situations, but
Mhm.
to a lesser degree by a mile, and with more like Eastern European chicks. And yeah, well, pre-selection kind of trumps a lot of that stuff. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Any preference in the Eastern European? Any
I
preference of looks, like a country?
I like probably Romania and Bulgaria the most. I don't think
Hmm.
Italy
Okay.
qualifies, and then Ukraine would be after that. I like Spain a lot too. For whatever reason, I do a lot pretty well with the Spanish chicks. Spain's super good.
What about the French ones?
Oh, the French ones I like a lot too. Of course, French and Spain are pretty close. Uh,
Okay, just checking. No, because you said you like them. So, but any particular reason why you like some European countries over others?
it's just the look a lot for me. I definitely have a physical type. Like, not all girls have a physical type, too. Not all guys have a physical type, apparently. This is very strange to me. No one ever talks about this. I could not date a girl who's not my physical type, like, for very long at all. Not at all. But I see guys date girls that look totally different. This makes no sense to me. Or at least this is not something I can relate to. I don't know about you.
Well,
Do you?
because they don't have many options. That's why maybe
No,
not as many as you.
that's not why.
No, from yeah. Oh, wow. Tell me why. What do you think then?
They're
They're
just
not conscious.
it's just they say they're I don't know they're attracted or they're looking at different things. But okay, I've seen a guy pick a girl that I liked and then pick a girl that I just had zero interest in. Like very different. One second,
No worries.
need to wrap things up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I forgot. I think I wanted to say one more thing. Anything you'd like to wrap this up with?
Just to say that it was great having you on the pod. Really, really enjoyed the conversation, and again, honored to have to have been able to share stuff with you. And yeah, man, I think it's gonna be episode 2, so I'll be looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yes.
Well,
Thank you for having me on. It's been fun. I gotta get some sleep. We'll talk later.
yeah, talk later. Have a good evening. Well, good sleep, and
Mhm.
thank you very much for everyone for watching.
All right.